So, you want to be a cosplayer? Hey guys, guess what? It's another good one today. Today's episode of So You Want to Be a Cosplayer is one where I get to learn a lot. It's about 3D printing and, how awesome that is. 3D printing's been something that I've used rarely when it comes to cosplay, and usually it's implemented in details, little things, I did the bat spikes on my Batman gauntlet once. So it's not something I have tons of experience with, but it's definitely something that I've wanted to get into more. So hopefully this video teaches me and you, if it's your first time, how you could implement 3D printing and how you can get into that as a cosplayer. So without further ado, let's jump into the episode. There we go. We're recording. That means we're recording. Gentlemen, how are you doing today?
Good.
Excellent.
Good.
You?
I'm good. I've had Jeff and I've had Michael Myers, and every time we start this, I always kind of have like the look at me. I am the captain now. You're on
my show now.
You're on my show. No, I'm not locked in here with you. You're locked in here with me.
Oh, here we go. Okay, Rorschach. Okay, settle down.
It's good. JS and Rob, thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate it. This is a fun one because. For those of you guys who don't know, So You Want to Be a Cosplayer is kind of aimed at people who are just getting into the hobby. And so because of that, I actually get to learn a lot because there's a bunch of the hobby, the majority of the hobby, that I do not interact with either on a regular basis or just at all. And 3D printing is one of those things where I've had some people do some 3D printing for me a very long time ago. But since then I haven't touched it. I just haven't had, the availability or the time. I know myself, if I started 3D printing, that would be my hobby now for quite a while, And
it kind of does. You're right.
It does. Yeah.
You
have to hold, a whole new skill set. And so I decided you guys, both of you guys kind of work in the 3D printing that adds to your cosplay. You do a bunch of other things. You'll buy cosplays. You'll make you do some foam crafting. You'll do some kind of customization, but also then there's 3D printing involved as well, which is I think a great way to introduce 3D printing because I think a lot of people will see 3D printing cosplays and they'll see the Iron Mans at San Diego and New York with the moving gears and all that kind of stuff and think like, I have to do that for 3D printing? No, you don't have to. You can do, just helmets.
You know how much work that is?
Seriously.
That's like years of, check out Frankly Built's website, YouTube. That's basically how he got started, is building 3D printed Iron Man suits. And bonkers, absolutely bonkers, the amount of work that it takes to build something like, it almost makes it just easier to just go buy it like Ben did.
Seriously,
you buy it and then you customize it and you add things, because I think we're going to get into that actually in a little bit, that whole buying versus making it yourself, because it's something that people need to understand about 3D printing. It's not always as cost effective as you might.
No, yeah, absolutely. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about you guys. Let's introduce you guys. I know you. I think a lot of people that watch these videos at the moment know you. But in the case that we don't know you, Jason, Rob, do you want to just take a turn and just kind of say who you are, how long you've been cosplaying, and kind of what's your corner of the cosplay community? Where do you like to sit in the cosplay community?
Well, my name's JS. I'm one of the co-founders of the Geeks and Company. We're a cosplay group. I've been cosplaying now, I want to say, since 2016. I think is when I first started going from trying to make props to making more costumes.
Okay.
Even though I still struggle at making costumes, because let's be honest, I am more of a prop maker. Whether I do foam work, I've done a lot of foam work over the years. My Predator, which unfortunately you can't see here right now because he's still in a bin from last week's Comic-Con, but he's mostly foam. foam is how we kind of got our start in cosplay, and it kind of became our thing. Is taking foam and making it look real, and people started looking up to, hey, if we're going to be making a costume out of foam, like we want to make it out of foam because we know we could make it look so good and so real out of foam, right? So it kind of became our thing.
Mhm.
But then we got into 3D printing, and I think that's really when, for me, cosplay changed completely. Because now I went from making stuff to now I'm making costumes. Now I
Mm.
can properly represent a character in the way that I see him in my mind.
Sure.
That's
Yeah.
what 3D printing has given me the ability to do. Then we go to cons.
Yeah. Just a few. Just
We
a
go
few.
to cons. We have booths at some of the major cons here in Ontario: Toronto Comic Con, Fan Expo, London Comic Con. We were at Western National Collectors Convention, I think is what it was called, last year.
Mm.
We throw a Star Wars Day event out in London as well. We do a Cosmos in the Market where we all dress up in our Christmify our cosplays, and we go out to the Christmas market in Toronto. So we do a bunch of events like that. We try to bring the community together, basically, is what we do. And I've known this guy, for like what, 15 years now?
Yeah, it's been about 15 years.
Yeah, about 15 years. We used to live on the same street. We lived like 6 doors down from each other. That's how we met. Now you've left us. You've moved away.
Yeah, so
You escaped the asylum.
yeah. Yeah, so for those who don't know me, I am Rob, and like Jay said, I've known this guy for about 15 years. So a lot of the things that he was doing, I sort of was hanging out with him, learning a lot from him. Actually, we have a lot in common, so we kind of worked on projects together here and there. We did a lot of Halloween stuff when we first met.
Kind of how we got started into it, right?
Yeah.
It was Halloween.
Yep, and then he got into doing what he was doing with the cosplay, and I was kind of like, I like making stuff. What are you making? That looks fun. And then just kind of like basically apprenticed for the longest time, apprenticed in quotes, with JS. And yeah, part of the Geeks and Company, have been since the very beginning. Not very much regular on the podcast, but I drop in here and there, mostly in person at events.
I know that you guys don't have a moderator, but Rob, I feel like you're almost like a moderator because you're in the chat quite a bit, and you do a lot of engaging on the chat, which is what I appreciate as well. Like it'll be JS and Jeff interviewing, and then a lot of times I'll see you and Jen then in the chat and making sure that everyone's talking. So I it's really, really cool the way you guys have kind of settled into the Geeks and Co. company.
Yeah, I think everybody's kind of found their place. The people that are
Mhm.
involved with it kind of naturally settle into what they were good at, what they were talented at. That kind of brings us all together. And what Geeks and Co delivers is a combination of a lot of different people's interests and talents and what they bring to the team.
Yeah, no,
Fair to
absolutely.
say?
I would say what's interesting is hearing you guys, like, it's really cool. Obviously, you guys started as individual cosplayers, but you guys have definitely moved into that community side of things. You're these, pillars of everyone goes to a con, and like it's a question: is Geeks and Co going to be there? Like, is there a booth? Is there, especially with the last couple of years where you guys have had such a success in bringing people to the booth and keeping cosplayers with cosplayers and making those big crowds. Even if you get tucked away into a corner, you make sure that corner is the most like bumping loud fun corner there is, which I and of course other people have really appreciated. So I met you guys through.
I mean, I appreciate that, FYI. I mean, that's that. I know I'm pointing this way because for me you're over here, but you're that way in my screen. But I appreciate that, buddy. That's kind of what we kind of want the Geeks and Co to be about in the first place.
Mhm.
We are a community group. We do this because we not only want to. I got a lint here that I'm seeing in my screen that's bugging me. Sorry. We not only want to promote cosplay and show people, hey, look at what we do, right? Come and hang out. Maybe you can do this too, right?
Yeah.
Like it's a big part of what we do, but bringing the cosplayers together, right? I feel like there's been something missing in I think it was Michael Myers that made that point. There was something missing a little bit, or maybe it was Richard, in the community where there's a lot of us that love to do this, but there's not that one thing that kind of brings us all together to hang out together, to kind of be part of a thing together.
Yeah.
That's what we try to kind of tried to do, right? Is bring everybody together and say, hey, everybody is welcome. Right? I mean, there are other community groups that, listen, I love them, but it's you got to be this, and you have to have this, and it's this. See, these are the rules, and you can't do this. And no, right? Like that's not what we're about. It's literally we're there to hang out, we're there to have fun, and we're there to share in our passion for making stuff and cosplaying. Because let's be honest, we don't all make stuff, and that's completely fine. You don't have to be a maker to be a cosplayer, right?
No.
But the thing that brings us all together is the conventions, the events, and dressing up. So we want to make sure that people know that, hey, there is a community out there, and everybody is welcome within that community. So I'm glad that people are starting to see, like, you know, that that's what it's about, because really it's the whole purpose is that
our mission
right?
statement.
Yeah. So yes. So well, I really appreciate the feedback. That's yeah.
Yeah, you're succeeding. Honestly, like it's one of those. I've met people online who have even gone like, I haven't had you been referred or like suggested by them, but I've definitely gone like, are you coming, you know, or whatever? Did you go to this con? Oh, did you hear about like Geeks and Co is there? And I just went, well, I knew they were there. I wasn't able to go to the con. And they're like, you know Geeks and Co too? And I'm like, yeah, obviously. Which is funny how I was gonna mention how because I met JS through a Cosplay Alliance. It was like a building competition.
Yes, that's right. I was hosting with Vera and Aaron.
Yes.
From Makers. We were hosting. It was called Forged in Foam.
Forged in Foam. That's what it was called. I was talking with CJ, like Josh from CJ Props.
CJ and Josh was there as well.
We were reminiscing about that, and we were just like, "Oh man, that was great."
Yeah, that's the first time me and you got to chat. It's the first time I got to chat with CJ. It was it's the only time I got to chat with Willow Creative, which is one of my favorite makers of all time. She's so talented. If you guys don't know Willow Creative, you gotta go check out her YouTube. She does some stuff that is absolutely out of this world. That show was amazing.
It was
amazing. And you guys, the speed at which you guys were building shit, I couldn't comprehend how Fred was there. Fred Wolf Cosplay, a good buddy of ours as well. Yeah.
It was like it was sort
crazy.
It was somehow we captured Con Crunch in an hour. You got to like watch Con Crunch in a gladiator ring.
And it was well set up because we had all of you guys, and then while you guys were building, we could go and chat with the individual people and bring you guys up on screen and see what you guys were doing. And it was fun. It was nice. Yeah, it was nice to have 3 people involved in that broadcast, me, Vera, and Aaron, because that way all 3 of us could, you know, interact and take care of the platform and bring up people. And yeah, it was neat. It was fun. That was a great one. And that's where we first met.
Yeah, that's where we first met. And then from there, it was Geeks and Co. And then I think you guys actually had me on the podcast really quick. And
we had you very shortly after that.
Yeah. I think because you mentioned that if anyone was interested, and I was like, sure, why not? That'd be fun. And
then Josh shortly after that.
Sorry?
No, actually, Josh took almost CJ.
Yeah.
I think it almost actually took a year after that for him to actually say, "Hey, like, can I come on?" I was like,
he's a humble guy. He's a very humble guy.
Please come on, right?
Yeah. He's fantastic. Oh, so good. Oh my goodness. I had him on. I interviewed his podcast. Fun fact, guys, I don't record these in order. But I had him yesterday. We were talking about armor cosplays.
Oh, well, there you go.
We talked for an hour about it, and it was fantastic being able to pick his mind. But
yeah, I hope he gets to come to a con up here at one point.
He wants to. He wants to.
But I would love for him to be able to make it his way up here. People would fucking love his stuff. It's just nuts.
Yep. No, 100%. I even told him, I was like, dude, I live an hour away from Toronto, but if you're worried about housing, like I have a spare bedroom. If that's what gets you up here, like, please come on in. Come on up. We'd love it.
Yeah.
It's been fantastic getting to know you guys, and as well as getting into and seeing 3D printing in cosplay more incorporated, because like me, like a lot of people see foam crafting, and then you see the fabricators, which if you guys haven't seen the video, I break down very general, loose terms about the different kinds of cosplayers that you might interact with. One of them, and which is what I title as fabricators, which are 3D printers. People who use 3D printing as the primary way of creating cosplays and costumes and changing their appearance. So they see the Iron Men, the legions of Iron Man or Dr. Doom or whatever. And they don't see very many people because it's not as flashy, maybe, but they don't see the people who have just done the 3D printed masks or just the 3D printed gauntlets. Up until I think Mandalorian, the show, changed that quite a bit, because all of a sudden you had the Mandalorian helmet that was printed. You couldn't escape it on Instagram, getting and seeing those posts. But when did you guys start incorporating 3D printing into your foam crafting? Was it supplementary, or was it actually like very much like we've seen with the Mandalorian stuff, which is entire helmets? Everything else is kind of foam, but the helmet, at least, because that's a hard thing to do with foam, the helmet was printed. How did you guys kind of start? How did you guys get into that?
I mean, for us, the first project was the Predator, right? That for me. Okay, let me back up for a second. And Rob, you correct me if I'm wrong here, but if I remember the sequence of events correctly, we decided that, hey, let's do Predators. And then it was like, okay, well, how are we going to do the biomasks? And then we started looking into foam patterns and then making our own patterns. And then it was like, fuck it, I'm just going to buy a 3D printer and we'll 3D print, right? That's how I think that came along, was the biomask, because the rest of the Predator is pretty much all foam. I mean, we got some, like my dread beads are 3D printed. Yours, Rob's, are actual copper. Not copper.
They are copper pipe.
They are copper.
Okay.
JS was the first one to get a 3D printer, so for the first few years, he was the only one that had a printer, so he was able to print stuff. And unless I'm like, can you please print me something, I had to kind of live off the land or find other ways, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, the beads on mine are from a copper pipe that I used a
cut up.
hacksaw to cut up. Like 100 of those things to put on mine, and his are 3D printed.
But that was the first project.
And that's a helmet that I can understand. Like it's weird angles and weird shapes, and it's all smooth. It looks like it's all cast in one go. So that it makes sense that you would kind of go, screw this. I'm 3D
for
printing
me.
This.
Yeah, I think the key recognizable piece of the Predator is the face.
Oh, face. Okay.
Right?
I thought I was going to do the forehead, but yeah.
Okay, sorry. Let me back up. It's the head, the complete head, right?
Mm-hmm,
the biomask with the dreads. That's the recognizable thing of the Predator.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it was very, very, very important that we get that right. We spent months. I want to say like 3 months we spent designing and developing and building the first. I was turning around to point in mind. It's not there right now.
He's always there.
Yeah, he's always there. The first head took like 3 months to build. Once we had that built, after that, the second one went pretty quick. I think he only took 3 or 4 weeks to build the second one. But it was important that the sizing was right. And it was important that the dreads fell correctly, but more importantly, it was important that the biomask was correct. Right now, everybody's gonna say, "Oh, but JS, there's like 14 different kinds," and there are. Every Predator we've seen has a different biomask, but they all have a very distinctive look. And we need to be able to capture that look. And from the foam tests that I had done, I couldn't get it right. So if I hadn't bought a 3D printer, we never would have done the Predators. It's that simple. Yeah. And the armor could look like shit, but the heads are so correct that people buy into it right away.
Yeah.
The illusion is made the minute they see the head. The rest doesn't matter, right? The illusion is now there.
Yeah.
I'm
I'm working on those film templates, guys. I promise. I'll get there.
Oh yeah, that's kind of how we got into 3D printing. I mean, for me, I was always, like I said at the beginning, more of a prop maker than a costume maker.
And was that for, were you like into shorts films and stuff, or was it more like seeing the Dragon Blade from Power Rangers and wanting that? I don't know what the term is.
Yeah, I mean,
was it more that kind of
yeah,
stuff?
it was more about, you know, making my own stuff, right? Like my DL44 and my lightsabers, they're all 3D printed, right? A lot, well, right now, not right now, but usually a lot of the stuff you see behind me is stuff that I've made. My Surtur's crown, right? 3D printed. Like I wanted to be able to make pieces that I couldn't necessarily be able to either afford,
Sure,
or were available easily, right? Like a nice replica of a DL44 back then when I 3D printed this wasn't super easily accessible. Right now you can buy a friggin', they have what are they called, like the BB guns, the airsoft. They have an airsoft DL44 that is so accurate. That's what they used in the filming of Solo. The DL44 he has in Solo is a freaking airsoft gun, right? So you can just go out and buy one now. Back then you couldn't.
Sure.
So yeah, that's kind of where the 3D printing kind of, for me, was a nice piece, right? It's for the accessories. That's another thing you mentioned at the beginning too, or just when we started talking, is you're seeing people that use 3D printing as their, you know, to make full-blown Iron Mans and stuff like that. But I would challenge that most of the people that 3D print, they don't make fully 3D printed costumes. They use 3D printing to add on to existing things, right?
No, of course. No, the fabricator title is, it also includes like silicon casting, and it's people that use more like industrial methods than buying, you know, dollar store foam. That's more the delineation. But no, and I think that's kind of what I was getting at, which is most people just see the minority who are doing Iron Man suits. They don't see guys like you, and even got people who are just making belt buckles out of 3D printing for you know, the Batman Who Laughs. They're not seeing those people who are incorporating.
Sorry, Freakish. That reminds me, Rob, I'm working on something for you, bud. It's not ready yet, but yeah. Okay.
Is it a belt? Is it a belt buckle?
It might be.
It might be. Oh
no. Sorry. Okay.
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead,
I spilled the beans.
apologize.
I spilled the beans. I'm sorry. That's on me. No, that's all good. This is kind of a good launching off point. When we're looking to incorporate 3D printing into cosplay, are there steps that people can take without having to go out and buy a printer, but they want that 3D, you know, model project? Like, for example, I don't have too much experience with it, so it's kind of why I'm asking you guys. But I know that like maker spaces have become a thing. Do you guys have any experience with that, or is there anything that you can kind of, you know, attest into working with maker spaces or other commissionable areas? If people want to start 3D printing pieces into their cosplay, start putting 3D printed pieces into their cosplay, but they don't want to invest those hundreds of dollars into a printer.
Do you want to?
There's a couple ways that I can think of off the bat.
Please, yeah.
I'm gonna let Jess talk about one piece of it, but something that's come up recently that wasn't necessarily there when I started, or it's not as widespread as it is now, but your local library. I'm gonna talk about my local library.
Yeah.
So I go there to work out, and recently in the last year, they have created a space, a nice huge room that is a makerspace, and they have everything in there from crickets to, they have 2 3D printers.
Crickets, as in the like make stickers and stuff.
Yeah,
like that, right? Like yeah. So I think it's a cricket or something like that, right?
It's a cry cut.
Cry cut.
C-R-I-C-U-T.
Yeah.
Cricket,
Okay.
yeah.
The first thing that came to mind was like a cricket arena, and I was like, I don't think that would fit in the
no.
library.
Oh, all right, I kind of glazed over that.
No, that's all good.
All kinds of things you'd find in a bigger makerspace, but
cool. Okay.
they have a couple 3D printers in there. And I've gone in there on a couple occasions, and I know JS has as well, and just talked to the guys in there. And that would be one, if you didn't have anything or didn't know where to start, that might be somewhere that you didn't necessarily think of off the top of your head, but that where you could start and go in there and talk to them and say, hey, I want to print this little belt buckle, or I want to print a Spider-Man logo or something like that, and ask them, how can you help me? That, and it's free. That's the best part. It's free.
Exactly, right?
Except if you wanted to print something, you've got to pay for some material, right?
Sure, of course.
But the advice is free.
But the advice is free. The people are there. They've got better printers than I've got. And I think that would be one place where you could
they
go
have
if
a
you didn't have
bamboo.
anything. Yeah, the quality is amazing.
Like, yeah, they
have
that
the bamboo printers?
4-color one. It's the bamboo. What is it? X1?
I don't know what the model
Anyway,
is, but yeah,
is
multiple colors.
Sorry, is it printing bamboo, or is that the model name?
No, the company is called Bamboo. I believe the printer is the X1, I think.
I mean, nowadays it's so hard, printer. Right?
So it can literally have, it can have 4 different filaments of different colors and print in real time in 4 colors. Yeah, and the quality is bonkers. A really nice printer.
That's crazy. Because I know now, like with 3D print, they've made machines now that they do it with metal. So you can like just 3D print a metal thing. I know that cement is being used. I know I've seen one that's like a plaster, some sort of like paper product, I think. So I wonder if you were saying bamboo, and I was like, they're making bamboo printers now.
No.
You never know though. Like,
right? That's what I was getting about.
They're starting to 3D print like houses and stuff like that.
That's what I was thinking. I mean, they look like bee houses, like beehives, but I mean, hey, one step closer.
But yeah, your local makerspaces, they're fantastic for resources. They're fantastic in the sense that if you have a project in mind that you want to do, but you don't necessarily have all the tools, like Rob says, whether you want to cut a stencil so that you could paint something, but you want it to look perfect, right? Or you can go to the makerspace and use the Cricut machine there to cut your stencil. You can get little things 3D printed. Now, of course, you're not going to 3D print an Iron Man armor, right, at your local makerspace,
right?
No,
but
you're not going to start there either.
Exactly. The other option is in the 3D printing community, there are a lot of people that actually will sell their services, right? If you say, hey, I need this printed, they will charge you X amount of dollars and they will 3D print it for you, right? And usually it's not super expensive for raw prints because they usually use a basic calculation of, this is my setup fee, and that covers all the crashes and the failures and figuring out how to print it the first time. And then after that, it's usage of the printer, right? So you pay a certain dollar amount an hour of printing. So the bigger the item, if it's going to take 2 days to print, it's going to cost you a little bit more money. But if it takes 15 hours to print and it's $1 or $2 an hour, that's all of a sudden affordable to get 3D printed accessories that you can then customize, paint, finish, do whatever you want, right? So that's a very, very good way to start if you don't want to spend $600, $700, $800 on a 3D printer. You might be able to spend $30, $50, $100 on a couple of accessories to take your costume to that next level, right?
Yeah, and like the first thing that comes to mind are face shells for Spider-Man. That's a very big thing.
Very common one.
But I mean, do you really want to spend $800 to get a $50 faceplate if you can just go to a makerspace? I think universities are another thing. I know that universities now are starting to have those, or colleges. So it's definitely worth looking into. The library one, I didn't even think about looking at a library. So
a lot of them
thanks for that, Rob. That was great.
Yeah, it really depends on, do you just want to buy the piece that you're a custom piece? Like JS said, you can go and get that done as a service. You can have someone commission something. If you want to get into the hobby and ultimately lead up to buying your own printer, those maker spaces are great places to get involved in, for sure.
And I feel like there's definitely, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like in the same way that as cosplay has become more mainstream, the community has opened up quite a bit in that, like you were saying, the advice is free. There's a lot of times where I've just talked to people online with 3D printing and just asked, like, how long did this take? What kind of filament did you use? You know what I mean? And like everyone seems in the same way that cosplayers, when at the end of every episode, I always say, like, if you have any questions, please message me or message us, and we'd love to get back to you as fast as we can. But I think with the 3D printing thing, because it's so popular, the community is kind of opened up in regards to that. Would you say that that's correct?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
I think so. I don't see a lot of gatekeeping in the 3D printing community.
No.
The bigger it gets, the more we learn.
Mm-hmm.
The more we learn, the more we can do, which in turn pushes the manufacturers to build better and faster and et cetera, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
The more people that are into this, the quicker the technology is developing. And now we've got machines. They have a completely new type of firmware now called clipper-on 3D printing machines. They can print extremely fast. I've seen guys print full helmets in under a day. Okay.
How long does it take for you?
The Bo-Katan helmet took 2.5 days to print.
Oh wow. Okay, so it'd be much faster then.
Right.
Oh,
This
yeah.
is much faster, like 5 times faster. So yeah, the technology now is starting to move quickly. The ease of use, like you almost don't even have to know how to level your bed now, because it almost pretty much levels itself. It's very basic. It's very easy to do. You punch a couple things in and boom, you're flat. You're printing perfect. That was the one key thing that was the biggest pain in the ass.
I was gonna say that's one of the questions
3D
I
printing.
had was getting everything set up seemed like such a hassle.
Leveling your
totally.
bed. That's the biggest issue, always.
Yeah, so I've had 2 printers. I'm on my second one now. The first one I had to manually level it. This one that I have now, it has auto leveling, so I just press a button and it auto levels, and it's
That's so good.
night and day.
Oh yeah.
The result, like when I was leveling my bed myself, it's so frustrating, right? You spend almost just as much time trying to get that right as it takes to print what I was trying to print, and it was demotivating, right? Because then you try to print and it'd be off, and okay, gotta level it again. You keep going. Now just a couple buttons, boom, 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 auto levels itself, and get a flawless print.
That's awesome to hear. Are there any programs that you would suggest? Now, I won't be able to put all of them down in the description, guys, but some of them, for example, I know Thingiverse is one that I've looked at. I don't know if it's changed. It was a few years ago that I was introduced to it, but Thingiverse seemed to be a pretty good spot. I know scaling and all that's an issue, but I found a plethora of things on Thingiverse. Are there any other programs where people can find 3D files?
Tons of them.
Yeah.
As far as repositories, there's 3D, there's Thingiverse, there's printables.
I use Cults a lot. Cults 3D.
3D.
Called 3D.
My Mini Factory. You know what? A good place to start actually is a website called Yeggi. Yeggi. It's a search engine, and it searches a lot of the common sites, whether they be the page.
Yeah. Oh. The hell? You're not part of what happened? I'm back.
We're back.
I don't know what happened there.
Apparently, we Yegi, stay away from. No, I'm totally kidding.
There's a couple of makers that make these incredible 3D prints. Like there's one specifically that I found because he was doing Transformers. He's doing 3D printable articulated posable Listen, it's amazing. And where I usually get all of that information is from one source. And if you want to get into 3D printing, or if you're already 3D printing and you are not following Uncle Jesse on YouTube, you are missing out. Yep. Uncle Jesse is the premier spot where you're going to find information on new printers, new technologies, new websites, new software. He's the guy that's going to get you all that information. Uncle Jesse, I can't recommend him enough.
I'll have the description down below for that.
Yeah,
the link for that.
Yeah, he's the my one-stop shop when it comes to wanting to learn anything new. Listen, I'm that guy. Every video he puts out, I watch. That's it. If the new video comes out, I get an alert on my phone, I watch it.
That's a great, yeah, for sure, a great place to learn about the industry and everything like that. I think how we started this conversation off and what might have got cut off there with JS is if you want to go and search for models, like
Yes.
pre-built models. So we started at
Yes.
Thingiverse, great place to go. But Yagi is almost like a Google for all
It
of the
is.
different sites to look
Perfect.
for new
Okay.
models. So
Okay. Perfect. Okay,
If
that's
you
awesome.
want to talk about software, is a
Yeah.
different conversation.
yeah,
Software is a
If
different
we're talking
conversation.
about programs, when we're talking about programs, that's a completely different conversations because in the
Okay.
3D printing world, there's two different things. There's 3D modeling
Yeah.
programs
Yeah.
and there are slicing programs,
Right. Okay.
right? And that's something that a lot of people before they start 3D printing don't understand. They think they can download a file off of Thingiverse and pump it in their printer and it's going to print. No, that's not how that works, right? You need first a file, and then you need to turn that file into a code that the printer will understand.
Right. Okay.
That's what the slicer does. The slicer
Mm.
takes your inputs, the settings that you want, the layer heights, the speeds, where you want support, temperature, yeah, et cetera, all those settings that you decide, the slicer turns that into code that the printer then understands and can just follow that pattern to print whatever it is that you want to print. So
Okay.
there's different things there, right?
And so are slicer programs married to certain printers, or is it like kind of like printing where you have like Adobe PDF and you can
Kinda.
kind of you can choose what printer you want to print to. Is it similar to that?
Kinda. The most common one is Cura.
Cura. Okay.
Cura. That's what I mostly use. Now there are a bunch of them. Where you start needing different types of slicer is if you're doing resin printing, which we haven't even talked about. But resin printing, it resin printing builds the print down, not up.
Right.
Right. So it's a completely different type of system. So it has its own slicers,
Okay.
its own group of slicers for that. But there's a ton of them. I mean, Prusa makes one. Listen, there's
You can go on and on, but Uncle Jesse's the
yeah,
place to go look for that kind of stuff.
100%. But Cura is probably the easiest. It's the one that comes with most printers.
Okay.
It when you set it up, it has profiles for almost every single printer that exists already pre-built in.
Yeah, so you open Cura and you say, I have this printer. I have an Anycubic Viper 3D. That's what I have. So I say, I'm using this, and then it knows everything about the profile of your printer. And then you can further sort of narrow down your settings from there. But
well, hey, that kind of leads into my next question, which is, are there different kinds of filaments you would recommend for different projects? I know I don't know if there's different kinds of resin, but I know that there's resin, there's PLA, there's this other one. Would you say that using PLA for a helmet is better than a gauntlet, or does that not really matter? It's really what you are comfortable with and can afford and all that.
That's a loaded question.
I think that, like, in my mind, I go, yeah, okay, go for it.
I was going to say, let's separate resin out for a minute.
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to take resin out of this conversation, and a little caveat, resin I would more likely use for if I was into printing like minifigures and super detailed smaller things, statues that I was going to paint. That's where I'd go to resin.
Okay.
If we, what's the name of the category for it? Is it like PETG printers?
FDM.
Like, FDM. Thank you very much. So if we're talking about FDM printers, that's what I think. I'm gonna pass it back to JS, but let's just leave resin out of the conversation.
Yeah.
Okay.
For what we're talking about.
So when you talk about FDM printers, you're talking about printers that use a plastic filament that goes through it and it melts the plastic and it lays it down, right? That's what FDM printing is. It's additive manufacturing process. There are the main or the most common types of filament are PLA, ABS, and PETG. There's a million other kinds. There's PLA plus, there's a carbon inlay, there's wood filament. Listen, there's a plethora of different filaments, but those are the main three. PLA, PETG, and ABS are the main three things.
Interesting.
PLA is by far the most common because it typically is usually the cheaper.
Okay.
It's also the easiest to print in the sense that you don't need extra high temperatures. It's the lowest melting point. It's the hot glue of the filament world, right? It doesn't need a super high melting point, so you don't need a printer that is going to heat super high, which means you don't need an all metal hot end, which means all printers on the market basically support PLA. The problem with PLA is because it has such a low melting point, if you leave a PLA printed part, for example, in your car in the summertime, it's going to melt. Right? You bring your helmet out and you leave it in your hot car in the summertime, you're going to come back and it's going to be all freaking warped. Right? You use a power sander to try to sand that and you go a little too hard and it gets too hot and it'll warp. Right? So PLA is very, very temperature driven. You got to be very careful with the PLA. ABS and PETG print at a much higher temperature, which means that they're going to be much more heat resistant. PETG is hard to sand. This is the other thing. Whereas ABS is super soft. ABS sands like butter. ABS is usually people's preferred filament, but it's toxic. So you need an enclosure. It's very hard to, it's very ambient. A breeze comes through, your print's fucked. Right? So you need to have controlled temperature. You need to have controlled air, et cetera, et cetera. So so you need an enclosure basically. So a lot of people don't want to have to bother with either building or buying an enclosure or buying a printer that already has an enclosure because those usually are way more expensive.
Right.
People tend to stay away. People like me, right? Like that just do this for a hobby. Tend to stay away from ABS. It's usually PETG or PLA.
Okay.
Yeah, so all that being said, it's safe to say most of what we're talking about here in the cosplay world, and I know the both printers we have are the PLA printers, PLA Plus, and despite the ease of its low melting point and leaving it in your car melting and things like that, I've never had that problem. I have sanded a little too hard and had that problem, but easily correctable.
Yes.
I mean, I feel like kind of made it sound like it's a little harder to work with, but it's not as hard as maybe just left me with the impression.
It sounds like it's very similar to foam in that way, where if you do leave your foam stuff in a car, it's going to warp. If you sand a little too hard, you're tearing apart your foam.
Yes.
So it's obviously, I know that it's two different kinds of worlds, but if you're already through foam crafting, you're kind of already aware that you shouldn't leave foam armor in a van. If you are,
100%.
make sure it's sitting straight, that kind of thing.
If you use hot glue on your foam armors and you leave it in a hot car, all your seams will explode, right?
Yeah, or if you're doing like body paint and stuff like that.
Yeah,
heat's just not okay, which is why we live in Canada. That's why we live in Canada.
Yeah, as long as you keep that in mind, PLA is kind of the one everybody uses. I
think so. Yeah.
PLA Plus.
I've never heard of. I honestly haven't heard of the other ones before PLA, other than resin, and that's just because I'm big into miniature painting. It's if I was going to get a printer, I would probably do a resin printer just because I want to do some 3D modeling of miniatures and all that kind of stuff. But no, PLA is the one I've heard of. I'm guessing PLA is the one most people have heard of. So I really appreciate you guys diving into that, and I hope I'm learning tons, which means other people are learning tons, which is what this whole thing's about, which is great. Would you say that someone using 3D printing, now let's say they've been making buckles, they've been making Spider-Man logos for a little while, and they want to take a step up, but they're kind of, I don't want to say budget restricted, but let's just, for the sake of the argument, say budget restricted, or their maker space is only so big and all that kind of thing. That's creepy. You guys drank at the exact same time. That was weird. That was fantastic. I love that. Would you say that there's and obviously I think this is probably a personal choice, but I think it's still worth saying, is there a part of a costume that you think someone should, if they're going to use a 3D printer for something bigger, that they should focus more and use the 3D print to make? For example, is it props, use 3D printer to make props and then figure out the helmet later, or is it helmet and figure out props later? What do you guys think? I know it's subjective, but I still want your opinion.
I'll tell you how I start my projects.
Please, yeah.
And I'm relatively new in this, so I don't have a huge number under my belt, but I start with the hardest thing first to see if I can do that.
Mm.
And then if I can do that, then I make the rest of it, which is usually so far it's been the head pieces, right? Like we started with the Predator and said if you get that right, the rest creates the illusion, right? I did that with this Kylo helmet here. I got the Optimus helmet back there. I started with the hardest things first, which just happened to be the helmets. And then if I can do that, in my opinion, it's the helmets anyway. For me, if I can get that right, then I move on to the rest of it. So I've always started with the helmet myself. Jess?
Yeah, 100%. As far as like, I think depending on what you're making, it is going to be key as what parts you're going to want to be 3D printing versus maybe using foam. I feel that if you're going to be doing armor, 3D printing is not necessarily the best solution for armor, because let me tell you something. If you don't 3D print, or if you've never worked with a 3D print, the amount of sanding involved to make a part look smooth like it was, manufactured is mind-boggling. So if you can make something, a piece of armor out of foam, and it takes you an hour to make that piece out of foam, spend the hour making it out of foam, because you're going to be spending a week sanding after you've spent 12 hours printing. Like, do you know what I mean? So there's that part of it, right? You got to keep that in mind. The flip side is if you're going to spend, I don't know, and this is where I've fallen down that trap many times, and mainly because for me, it's always the hobby is the making.
Yeah.
Right. The cosplay for me is the byproduct of the making.
Sure.
So I love to make things, but I've spent $400 plus making an Iron Man helmet that I could have paid $150 to buy a black suit. Right?
But I mean, isn't that the joke with cosplaying though? It's like $150 on Amazon. I'll pay $500 in 6 months of my
and make
time.
it myself.
Yeah.
So, I've fallen down that trap. And it's the same thing when I make these helmets, and people are like, wait, you're selling it for $350? Well, yeah. Like, I spent $180 just in materials to make the damn thing, right?
Yeah, of course.
Not counting the month of time that it took me to sand it and paint it and all the layers and the weathering and it's never ending, right? So, you got to keep that in mind, that sometimes there are certain parts of your costume that maybe you should just go out and buy, right? You're not necessarily just going to jump straight to 3D printing.
No, I think the helmet thing, talking about the helmets, is a great example, because the I don't know, is it the Black Series now? You can get almost any Star Wars helmet.
Yeah, you can get them all
now at the Black Series. Now, I think, and I think, Rob, if I remember correctly, your Kylo, you've had some issues with the fitting of it. It's either a little too big or a little too tight. And I know the Black Series usually comes too big. And so I think that's the one thing 3D printing can allow you to do, is it can scale you. I don't know if Josh told me about this one program called Armor Smith, and it allows you to scale things, but I think it's primarily a Pepakura program. Is there something? No. It's not. Okay, so does that work for 3D printing as well?
Yeah, so Armor Smith, what it is you build yourself an avatar, and it uses... Listen, I don't know this. Off the top of my head, I think it's 86 points of reference.
Oh, wow. Okay.
86 measurements.
Yeah.
And you measure yourself, and you input all those measurements, and it builds an avatar for you that you can then import as a character in your 3D software. So when you want to size a piece of armor, well, you can just put it against your avatar and size it to your avatar. And then when you print it, it'll be a perfect fit for you. Right?
Okay, cool. Yeah, I didn't know that.
Example, I have a 3D scan of my head. I have a 3D scan of my head that's sized. I did it myself with my iPhone, with my work iPhone.
Okay.
I did the 3D scan of my head, and then I sized it to the right size. And now, when I want to print a helmet, if it's a helmet that like my Revan that I'm going to wear, I actually sized it. Okay, the first one I had it wrong because I don't know why. I think I went to centimeters instead of instead of centimeters or whatnot. So The helmet was massive, but when I then got the measurements right, the helmet is a perfect fit, right?
Yeah.
I don't have to worry about, is it going to fit? Is it going to be too big? Is it going to be too small? Am I going to look like a bobblehead? No. I can make now helmets that'll fit my head perfectly because I have a 3D scan of my head stored on my computer.
Right.
That's key
Okay.
if you're going to be doing stuff like that. Rob, actually, we need to scan your head. That's the next step. So next time, anytime you're going to be making helmets,
I've been wanting to scan my bust and get it 3D printed. Let's have a scanning party.
Yeah, we can do that.
We'll just
if we guys want to actually do that, there are places where you can get full body scans. You can walk in and it's a one shot. It's got like a bunch of cameras all around you and they take a one shot full body scan. And I hear they don't charge that much. So if we're a big group of people and want to do that, that'd be cool.
I got that done. There was it was like a paper filament of my Red Hood cosplay. This guy wanted to test it on cosplays and he wanted to like open it up as like a cosplay service.
Yeah.
And I knew a guy. And so, I got in with my Red Hood and he took a 3D scan of me in a couple poses and then printed me out. It was like a little statue about that big of me and my Red Hood. It was super cool. But it's like an Andy Serkis kind of like 3D, like all the DSLR cameras. It was super cool.
There's a spot in Toronto where you could go in and they would 3D scan your team. Like we were trying to do it with our team at work, and they would 3D scan all of us, and then they would make bobbleheads.
That's awesome.
So we would all have our own bobbleheads, right? So I thought that was pretty funny, but
that's pretty cool.
Oh, Rob, we can't hear you for some weird reason.
Can't hear you.
There we go.
There we go.
Yeah.
There we go.
I don't know what I was gonna say other than we should do that. We should go and we should do that.
Like
that'd be fun.
Skating party. Yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah.
Because for me, like I know everyone says this, but like I have a big head, and so getting 3D or not 3D, but like foam stuff to work on me, you always have to do the like put on. No, too tight. Open it up a little bit. Okay, but having that 3D bust, I can just do all that kind of stuff, and that's in my mind. That's the main thing that I'd want with a 3D printer is being able to create like a hand reference, for example, or stuff like that. A little bit more like a mannequin model type deal.
Well, you can print also a 3D print of your head. Once you've got that scan, you can 3D print your head, so that way anytime you're making something, you can make it on your head, right?
That's awesome. Okay, so guys, I'll have the Armorsmith link as well down here for you guys because I think in my mind I see that as important. So and it's my YouTube, so I'm gonna put it down in the description. So I don't want to. Oh, sorry, go for it.
I was just gonna say, and I haven't even reached some of these levels here of having scans on my head, and the result of that is I took a good guess at printing my Optimus helmet. But it came out, like significantly bigger than it really should be. So,
but I think that might actually work out. So,
yeah, the point there is just, we're all at different levels here. Even JS is way past where I'm at.
Sure, and I think it's probably similar to foam crafting or anything else, which is the more you use it, the better you're going to be at it. You're going to be able to read the language of the techniques and probably the program language as well, and just know how to do that a little bit better. Now, we're going to get into some sketchy territory here. I'm not paid to talk about any of the products here. I'm assuming you guys have not been paid to talk about any of the products that you guys have talked about. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, no, we don't get paid for anything.
No, but if you want to pay us to talk about your stuff,
there we go. There's the caveat.
Like to sponsor the Geeks and Co, you can reach out to us at geeksandco@gmail.com. We'll be happy to represent you guys. No, we don't. We don't get paid for anything. We do this all for fun, and it's all out of pocket. We do appreciate you guys buying the merch. There's a lot of people that have been buying the merch, guys. Thank you so much
for sure.
I still need to do a t-shirt swap with Jeff, which is going to be hilarious because I'm going to be wearing a very too small shirt and he's going to be wearing a very way too big shirt. But I want to talk about 3D printer models. Now, you guys have the same model. Is that correct?
No.
A printer? No. Okay. So that's even better. Are there printers that you would recommend to someone getting into it?
Yeah, right now the bamboo printers, like I said, are amazing. They're a little bit more expensive, but they're fantastic. The quality is great. They're super user friendly. They're basically the drop in and go style printers. They have a new Bamboo Mini right now, which the problem I think is it's a little bit small. I'm not quite sure what market they're trying to attack with the printer like that. But if you're trying to learn and you just want to print some small things, a good place to start. I have now 3 Elegoo printers. I have an Elegoo Neptune 2, an Elegoo Neptune 2D, and an Elegoo Neptune 3 Plus.
Gesundheit.
And they're amazing. My Neptune 3 Plus, I don't understand. I don't get it. The quality that comes off of that printer, it's massive. Like I can print full helmets, right? In one piece. And it's got auto leveling. It's not quite auto leveling, but it's bed mesh leveling. That's got all leveling for the people that maybe don't know about it. But yeah, the Elegoo printers are amazing. Stay away from the 4s. I'll say that. Don't get into the Elegoo 4 series. I've heard a lot of people that have issues with them. The people that don't have issues with them will swear up and down that they're the best thing since sliced bread, but there's a lot of people that do have issues with them. The 3 series is wow. What about you? Do you have any other suggestions on printers that you may?
The one I use is an Anycubic. It's an Anycubic Viper.
They're also good printers. Yeah.
It's been amazing. I got mine. So if we talk about buying printers, I got mine from an auction site. I went to highbid.com and I was able to get mine. I think at the time they went on Amazon for like $4.99.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I got mine for $150. And really it was just like an open box type of thing, right? And I took a chance on it and it's been amazing. So, and the entry point was like really low to get into it. But it's been great for me. The only thing, if I was to the only thing that would get me to upgrade at this point in time is really just to get a larger print bed so that I could print the helmet all in one shot. Right now I've got to print it. I got to cut it up and print it in smaller pieces and then glue it all together.
Which works. Doable. It works.
Totally
right?
works. But everything I've made has been that way so far. So
I was going to say, yeah, you guys had, but it is worth mentioning. And as much as I want to encourage people to get into 3D printing, there are some drawbacks and some things that you should know. You guys had ran into a mask breaking in half last year, right? And you had to deal with that because is that what the slicing is? Or is there a different term for the breaking up of one object into many?
Yeah, you're just cutting it up at that point into multiple objects. So just for point of reference, the mask that broke was the Predator mask. It was my Predator bio mask. It fell on the ground and it literally snapped in half at a seam. So it didn't break. It broke. It unglued at a seam. And that's kind of the advantage of being able to print something in one piece, right? If that would have fell, it probably wouldn't have broke, right? Yeah. Whereas it's only stuck with super glue. So super glue's strong, but it will break. Now we fiberglassed the back of our masks so that doesn't happen anymore.
Oh, nice.
Proof of that, Rob dropped his at Comic-Con and he's like, and he picked it up and it was really fine. That's what the fiberglass for. But yeah, that being said, don't let not having a big printer stop you from doing big things.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right? You can, if the files that you get aren't already pre-split up into pieces, like our biomasks, when I got the original file, there was the one that was one piece, and then there was another file that it was split into 3, made specifically for smaller beds, right? So that worked out for us. You can also use simple software like Microsoft 3D Builder or Tinkercad, or there's a bunch of very basic software that you can use to separate or cut up big files into smaller pieces that you can then print on your printer. That's a learning curve, right? You got to learn what works best and how to cut it up and how you're going to print it and the orientation, because that's going to make a big difference, whether you're going to be using supports or not, because you ideally don't want to use support because support is just wasted material and time. So, there is a learning curve there, but don't let that stop you, because that's part of the fun. For me anyway, learning that was the fun of 3D printing world, for sure.
Well, and just like any hobby, there's a learning curve, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think some people may be a little cautious in like, I just got over the learning curve for foam crafting. Why do I have to do another learning curve? And that's completely up to you guys. And what I'm kind of hoping, and maybe we can dive a little bit more into some tips and tricks for new printers for you guys. And I know you guys haven't been doing it for too long, which is why I think you guys are perfect to talk about it. But like, just because there's a learning curve and just because the mistakes are a bit harder to deal with maybe than say dropping a foam piece and my paint's chipped and now I just have to paint it again, versus helmet snapping in two. If you guys can just list off just a few things, or 10 are there some very basic, and obviously I'm sure you guys could do just an episode on tips and tricks for 3D printing, but some very basic intro level before you get started or before you dive into it? Are there things to look out for, tips and tricks on what to stay away from, or double check this on your machine from someone getting into the hobby?
Level your bed.
Level the bed.
And then level it again.
That's the number one.
And then you're going to level it again. Right? That's the number one cause of issues in 3D printing. If your prints aren't sticking, if you're having print failures, if your supports are falling, I will guarantee you 90% of the time your print bed is not leveled properly. Level your bed and do it again and do it again and do it again.
Even if it's an automatic process, just like hit the level bed button.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, the auto bed levelers
once or
are
twice
better.
should be enough.
Okay.
Budget permitting, if you're going to buy a printer and it has auto leveling, try to get that.
Yeah.
I would say.
For sure. I mean, it helps a lot. It mitigates a lot of those issues.
A couple other things that have been key to my success or failure in a project, it's come down to temperature and just being willing to experiment. So I've printed something, it's been an ultimate failure. It's demotivating. But the difference between failure and success was really just either raising the temperature of my bed or the nozzle by 5 degrees. And that was the difference between failure and success. Okay. So even if you don't succeed at first, try again, right? And then once you find out, and that'll differ from whether you're buying one brand of PLA to another, or PLA to PLA plus. The difference of a few degrees, 5 degrees,
one color to the next.
Yeah. One
of the same brand
at X and X plus 5, it'll make a difference. So like if you print something and it doesn't succeed the first time, tweak a couple settings, and then lo and behold, you get a perfect print, right? So
the color thing makes sense to me, because like colored hot glue is the exact same thing for me. If you did, like, if you got colored hot glue sticks, they tend to run hotter for whatever reason than clear glue sticks. I don't know why. I don't know the science behind it, but
it's the same thing with the PLA.
Okay, that's interesting. And I'm assuming it's not like, it won't be like every blue PLA is going to run at that temperature. That's different from every yellow PLA.
That's the problem, right?
And there's the experimenting part.
There's always a range on every roll of filament that you buy. It'll give you a range of where you want to be at to print that specific filament. But where within that range that specific filament will perform at its best is a crapshoot. You never know until you figure it out. And then once you figure it out, every roll, it will basically be the same, right? But all of a sudden, you change colors. Now it's a different temperature. Or you change manufacturer. All of a sudden, you go from AMZ 3D to, I don't know, whatever. Right?
Elegant.
Filament.ca's brand of filament, and they won't print the same. You'll need a different heat setting, right? So it's always a good idea to experiment with your filament. If you're using a new filament, you can print, they call them heat towers. So it's a file that you can download on Thingiverse, and then you set up your slicer software to print each layer of the tower at a different heat so that you can see where it's at its best, and then you can print at that heat, right? So there are a lot of little things like that you can do to to figure that out. Keep spare parts on hand. Nozzles. Buy a pack of nozzles on Amazon. They're like $10 and you'll get like 40 of them. Have nozzles on hand because you are going to go through nozzles. Nozzles are going to clog up. There are certain type of filaments that use up nozzles faster than others. When you start having problems printing, we had that issue just recently. Rob was like, dude, he's like, why is it that all of a sudden, like, I can't get it to fucking print right, blah, blah, blah. Just change your nozzle, man. Like, when was the last time you changed it? It's like,
yeah.
Change your nozzle, right?
Shut up.
Yeah. And then boom, all of a sudden it started printing fine again, right? So keeping nozzles on hand, keeping a spare PTFE tube or two on hand, or if you're lucky enough to get a direct drive printer, get a direct drive printer, because then you can print flexible filament, which I can do now, but I haven't tried. I can't wait to do that. I can print like a rubber style filament now.
Ooh.
But yeah, spare parts. Whatever spare parts you can keep on hand, they're cheap. Get them. Buy them ahead of time. Fans. There's a couple fans in your 3D printers. Just buy them online. They're usually like $5-10. Get a couple so that when you do go down, then you're not waiting for a week for a part to come in because now it's out of stock and you got to wait for it and you can't print while you're waiting. Just buy a couple parts ahead of time. It'll save you a lot of time and a lot of headache.
All right. Lastly, I want to talk about, and you guys kind of pointed at it a little bit, is that are there retailers, physical or online, that you would recommend for people? Is it better to buy, like, your printers company's filament, or are third-party filaments fine? Is that not a thing? It's fine, whatever filament you get, it can, it'll work for your printer. Or what would you guys recommend in regards to that?
Depends. If you're talking about filament, let's talk about printers for a second. I've bought all my printers online, except for actually that's not true. 2 of them I bought secondhand. I bought used from someone. But my original first printer and my Neptune 3 Plus, I bought online on Amazon. It's usually the best way to buy them. Amazon, they're usually prime products, so you get them the next day.
Nice. Okay.
If you have a problem and you need to return it, Amazon will take care of it. Amazon's really good for that type of stuff if you're going to be buying a printer. They also sell a lot of filament.
Yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily always end up being the cheapest. So if you can find some locally, fantastic. In our area, there's not a lot of options locally to buy filament, or at least consistent sources of filament. I like to use the same filament over and over and over and over again, so I don't have to worry about stupid figuring out settings and all that nonsense, right? So I tend to get my filaments from 3D Printing Canada, which are based out of Hamilton. I buy it online. They ship it right to my door. If I buy for over $100, I think it's $100 or $120 worth of filament, I don't have to pay shipping. Their selection is massive because that's all they do. So yeah, that's usually the route I go. And filaments.ca is a good spot as well, but it's sometimes hard to, availability isn't always there on filaments.ca.
Okay.
Where have you been getting your filament, Rob?
So I've gotten my filament either from Amazon or here's a special trick that I highly recommend everybody utilizes. Tell your extended family at Christmas.
Yeah.
You know when you get that like uncle that's like, what should I buy for you or whatever? And you say filament. Get people to buy you filament at Christmas. So those are my 2 things. So far, it's either been Amazon or I've been just getting things from other people. Yeah, that way.
Okay. The AMZ 3D filament on Amazon is excellent.
Okay, good to know.
It is excellent, and that's what I used to buy them mostly. But it's gotten expensive. Elegoo actually makes a good filament as well, and it's
also not cheap.
$8 or $9 cheaper than the.
Oh, really?
3D, yeah.
Interesting. I didn't even know that. I'm gonna have to go check out the filament now. All right.
It depends. You can buy like all kinds of different filaments too. You can buy like just like a basic black to the silky like looking golds and the reds and things like that, which are going to cost more, but
translucent filaments,
translucent, like the
I
glow
printed,
in the dark filaments.
yeah, glow in the dark. I printed my Godzilla here in red filament, and then I painted him just with acrylic paints, leaving the spine red. So when the light hits it, it looks like he's lit up red because it's a translucent filament, right? So you can
Yeah.
do a lot of cool effects with the different type of filaments that you can get. Yeah, it's really neat.
That reminds me of the I think the last time you guys had me on Geeks and Co, we were talking about monsters, and we talked about how Godzilla, just his silhouette is so recognizable. You've been like, every time you kind of rotate, I've seen just the back, and I've gone, oh, it's his Godzilla. That's all I needed to know, is just the silhouette, which is fantastic. So
I know you're a big Godzilla fan. Hang on.
So this is the
more Godzilla conversations, I think, than anything else over the years.
It's true. It's true. Look at that guy. So that's the that's painted kind of what, transparent?
Yeah, it's a red translucent filament.
Look at that.
Now the light's only coming from the front, so it's hard to tell. But even if I just do
printed that whole thing in red and then painted the black.
Yeah.
Black?
Oh. Yeah.
Oh, so this isn't even the one that you showed me, which was completely transparent.
Oh yeah, this is it. Yeah.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought you had painted. I thought you had printed it transparent, and then painted the gray totally covered, and then the red you did like a watered down red. Or
No. It was printed in a red transparent filament.
That's cool.
And then the only paint are the blacks and the grays that I use to finish them, right? And guys, this is a raw print off my N3 Plus. Raw print. That's only paint. And you cannot see a single print line in this thing. Actually, that's
looks great.
There's one somewhere that you can see right here. You can see one print line across him here. I don't know what happened there, but beyond that,
that's awesome. That's
I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like you can do some really cool stuff with a pretty entry level printer. Let's be honest. Like a $500 to $600 printer these days is fairly entry level, and you can do this type of stuff. And this is not as big. I can make them way bigger than this. FYI.
That's something that I feel like I've noticed just being outside of the hobby as well, is that the entry level machines are getting better and better and better. But
100%.
As the professional machines are also getting better, which is nice, because a lot of times products tend to go like beginner. There's someone kind of goes, well, we'll cheap out on a bunch of stuff to make a beginner one. And then a lot of people buy that and they get frustrated because they don't have the professional grade stuff, which is getting fantastic. But I've noticed for sure, especially price points, I feel like the quality you're getting for your price point is starting to just get better and better and better, which is 100%. Really encouraging.
Yeah, for sure.
100%. And back in the day, only the companies that made the big professional machines made entry level machines.
Right.
Everything else were kits. Right? You'd get a kit and you basically had to build it yourself, right? Like my first machine came in parts, and I had to spend 3 hours building it and putting it together and figuring it out. And it's scary at first, but it made me have to learn how the printer worked. What they were trying to do with these entry-level machines is a already built all-in-one solution at a price point that's appealing for home use, but they were shit because of the price point. Right? Yeah. Like if you want a finished product at the same price point, like you're not getting the same quality product, right? So nowadays, go to any manufacturer's website and look at their cheapest model, and it'll print just as good as their top end model. You know what I mean? Like they're really good. They're much easier to use now. Again, especially with auto bed leveling. Most of the printers now have auto bed leveling, which has been so amazing because now it's so easy to get a great print. Sorry,
well,
I forget what the question was now.
No, that's a great way to end it, because it's, guys, go out, take a look at the manufacturers. We've listed a few that I don't have one. Rob and JS have listed which ones that they recommend, which ones that they use, and also a bunch of places where you can find filaments and everything. So go out there, I hope this is giving you guys a bit more of like either like a grocery list or at least some encouragement to get into the 3D printing for cosplay, or just in general. Let's just print a bunch of Godzillas. It's not Godzilla. I still think it's Godzilla year. I know technically last year was, but you know what? It's Godzilla year still. So
hey,
let's pump them up a little bit more.
Godzilla Kong.
Oh, that's coming out soon, right?
Coming out next week or 2 weeks? So that's coming out very, very shortly. Which, unfortunately, I hear the initial reviews aren't very good. But
that doesn't surprise me, unfortunately.
Yeah,
but we can get into that hot topic, a whole other podcast on that one. So, guys, where can we find you other than Instagram? I'll have everything linked down below, but let's just go through all the social media handles.
For me, you know what? You can only really find me on Instagram, Rob the Bad Guy.
Mm-hmm. JS Belanger 1701 on Instagram. At Geeks and Co everywhere. Geeks and Co. Well, actually, no. Show them yours. Yeah, Geeks and Co. There you go. Everywhere.
And you guys just had a merch drop recently, right? So if you wanted to help support you guys directly with some moolah, that one. Do you guys have a Patreon at all?
We do not.
No. Okay.
We've been thinking of trying to do like a pre and after show.
Mm-hmm.
Like a after hours, you know what I mean, of our podcast, where it's just us chatting but not live. It's recorded and then would be dropped.
Yeah.
Extra content like that. I don't know. We've been thinking of trying to do stuff like that, but who's gonna pay for these old guys just yapping away, right? No. So, but we do appreciate people buying the merch. We've got a brand new university style design that we just released before the holidays. We've got some available on our website right now.
Okay.
Which really embodies the whole everybody's part of the club, right? That's kind of where that design came. Wow, sorry, I wanted to make my own X-Men t-shirt. Right? I'll be very honest. I wanted to make my own X-Men t-shirt, and that's what it turned into. It turned into, into this. But it's very fitting to what we do. So YouTube, Instagram, Facebook at Geeks and Co.
Geeksandcompany.ca. If you go to geeksandcompany.ca, you'll get everything that we're on.
All the links are there, including our Spotify. Guys, our podcast is on Spotify. We broadcast live every Thursday night at 7 p.m., but then Friday morning, our podcast goes live on all the podcast platforms. Spotify, of course, being our main one, or the ones we get the most listens on. We would appreciate if you went and checked it out. We do get silly sometimes. We do some stupid episodes, like we do some serious chats, mainly around cosplay, obviously, and geek culture. Give us a follow, please, on Spotify. We're trying to grow that side of the thing. Our Spotify, our podcast side of things have kind of stagnated a little bit, so we're trying to promote that a little bit more. So go give us a follow on your favorite podcast platform. We'd really appreciate that.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, gents, for popping in. It's been great to see you. Missed you at Toronto Comic-Con, unfortunately. I had major FOMO there, but I got to talk to you and I got to talk to Jeff beforehand, and I'll be talking to Megan in a little bit as well. So gonna catch up with all the Geeks and Co folks. So thanks you again. I'm gonna have all the links at least some of the links, most of the links that I said I was gonna put in the description. I'll have it down there for you guys. Definitely check out Geeks and Co. They're fantastic, and as we said in the beginning, good friends of mine. So definitely check them out. You also know, people who are watching, I don't know how to end these things, so I'm just gonna end it and say goodbye. We'll see you next episode.
Click like and subscribe if you haven't already.
There we go. That's probably what I should do.
Support your boy Noah here. Click that subscribe button.
Smash it.
Thanks, Noah. Smash that subscribe button.
See you later, guys.
Peace.
Please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more cosplay content.